of armed resistance. We sent it to Bialystok, to Grodno. 3 of our messengers were executed when they were intercepted carrying these leaflets. They managed to tear them up, but others, girls mainly, brought these leaflets to the ghettos. They did their duty partly, but it was late. It acted, it had an effect, but it was too late sometimes. People were shocked when they read it. Sometimes they said, this could not happen here.
Which ghetto was that?
It was a big ghetto in Bialystok, and serious public personages, leaders, people who perhaps later wanted to do all they could to save the Jewish population. They claimed, this cannot happen here. We have all these factories. They need workers. They need us.
There will be a witness regarding Bialystok, Mr. Kovner. So let us go back to an action organized by you to the smuggling of young people to Bialystok. President of Court, here too I would ask you to be short. Please remember. Mr. Hausner, I am coming to a very important and relevant subject, which concerns the accused himself. President of Court, you cannot complain about the patience the court is showing. You organized youth and smuggled them to Bialystok, asking for help from outside. Is that correct? And this help came through a German officer by the name of Anton Schmidt.
I'm prepared to explain this.
No,
yes,
please answer yes or no. Who was Anton Schmidt?
Anton Schmidt, he was a Feldwebel, a junior officer in the Wehrmacht of Austrian origin. He was the commander of a unit whose task was to gather stray soldiers who had been cut off from their units. The story of Anton Schmidt is one of the rare and amazing stories of those days.
Will you please be short? You contacted Anton Schmidt.
We did.
The first,
and Mordechai Tenenbaum Tamarov made his acquaintance.
And since October 41, the underground had contact with Schmidt, and he endangered his life to help you.
That is true.
And he did it not for money.
Correct.
He supplied your men with certificates, gave you military trucks.
That is also true.
And this is what was called the Bialystok operation.
Yes, that's what we called it, Operation Bialystok.
Do you remember that one evening you met Anton Schmidt secretly in January 42?
I do remember.
You were awaiting one of your envoys.
That is true.
Schmidt was nervous.
He was.
You had a few drinks. And you asked for details about Gestapo men.
Yes.
What did Anton Schmidt say to you?
When I asked him to explain who they were and what it depended upon, because I was among those who had reservations about smuggling people to Bialystok, not because of the risks, and there was a considerable risk, but we took a lot of people. It was a great distance from Vilna to Bialystok in military trucks, but I was bothered by one thought. If we had one fate, if this was total annihilation, what's the use of running away from one place to another? I wanted to know who this depended on. Some people thought this depended on one commander, the other local commander, this Gestapo man or the other Gestapo commander. I asked them about Schwanenberg, about Hinks, about Miller, about Weiss, about Lozer, about all these local commanders. At a certain moment, I remembered when he told me that those have no say. There is one man. I remember this with great precision. There is one dog called Eichmann, and he is organizing all of this. That's when I first heard that name. I did not know who he was, what he was. I wanted more details. At that moment, he sobered up and he said, "Man, I never told you anything. I won't say anything anymore."
Do you remember his words in German?
Yes, I think I do.
What did he say in German?
Diese haben nichts zu sagen.
He said, "They have nothing to say. There is a dog named Eichmann, and he arranges everything."
Anton Schmidt was arrested by the Gestapo later and executed for his connections with Jews.
Yes, he was.
Did you try to bring this news to the notice of the world? In January 42. When was he arrested, Judge Rave?
Approximately in March, I think he was executed, March 1942.
President, do you know his
rank?
rank?
Was Feldwebel. I estimate that he must have been, at that time, not too young, I think. He was a reserve officer, I believe. He was of Austrian descent.
You tried to bring it to the notice of the world, and the name Eichmann.
I did, yes,
What
I
did
tried
you do?
to.
What did you do?
We tried in 1942, we tried to transmit the truth of Vilna to the wide world. We tried to bring it to Moscow and from there to the free world. We sent two comrades, fighting comrades, two girls, who were to reach an objective, a really incredible objective, to cross from Vilna, to cross the front and get to Moscow. Since I was in charge of planning their journey, I remember precisely, I wrote a secret report. It had several chapters about the extermination, about the resistance organization, about an appeal for help, for arms, for parachutists, and also a list of people, officers, the chiefs of this execution, of this extermination, people whom we had heard about in examination. We heard this from informers, from spies.
Did you mention Eichmann's name?
In this report, explicitly, I mentioned explicitly that a Wehrmacht officer, an anti-fascist Wehrmacht officer, had informed us about these details. From what he told me, I understood that this man must be a very important man in this hierarchy of the exterminators. I naively assumed that he must be somewhere in that area, in the eastern area, and that's why I reported it. These two girls, that was a story in itself. They almost reached the front. They were captured. They were about to be executed at night. They managed to break away and return back into the ghetto. Later on, that was at the end of 1943. When I was with the partisans, I was asked by the brigade commander to transmit a report through the partisan mails to Moscow about all that had happened, about collaborators, about SS people, Gestapo people, and so on. In that report, too, sent through the partisan channels to Supreme Headquarters, to General Paul Marenko, Supreme Headquarters of the partisan movement. That report, too, included the same passage that I heard from an anti-fascist fighter in the Wehrmacht, this and so on.
And you mentioned the name Eichmann.
I explicitly mentioned the name. Only after the war, it became clear to me who he really was and what he was. Only after the war I learned what his duty, what his position
Judge
was.
Halevi, but you believe that this did come to the right
second
hands,
report-
this information.
The second report was delivered because I did something else. I know that. I included a song, and my poem, I included a poem, and that poem, through devious ways, reached this country and was published here in Haaretz, in the newspaper Haaretz, with my underground name Uri. It must have reached this country, I know that, from Moscow.
What is this, Mr. Kovner?
This is an announcement from the Ghetto Police Commander, 4th of May 1943. The announcement is that on the 30th of April, the workers Aharon Shulkin and his wife Rivka of the Strashun Street, number 1121, people employed in the brick factory on Ponar Street, went out to a village to buy food. They were arrested in the village. Without any interrogation, they were summarily executed. I warn again, it says, I warn once again that by orders of the security police and the security service, it is not permitted for any Jew without special permission of this German authority to be outside of town. Any Jew caught outside the city without permission will be executed. Signed, Bells. This was posted in the ghetto in the form of announcements with a black frame around it. It was photographed and was then printed.
Mr. Kovner, to complete your testimony, the President of Court, what did you
Yes.
say?
It was typewritten and it was then photographed for archives. One had to go over it with a special ink.
But there was a black frame.
Yes, the black frame was in the original. The letters had to be retouched with ink.
Now, before you finish your evidence, how did Wittenberg die, the first commander of the resistance movement? President of Court, such a poster was put up only in Yiddish.
Yes.
This was from the Jewish police.
They say that they were informed by the Jewish police says that they were informed by the
President says
Germans.
the ghetto Polizei, and the witness explains the Jewish police. Will you tell us about the activities of this underground resistance movement? And about the death of its first commandant?
Your Honors, I can't relate all that has happened to us and all that we did, and I am selecting, I'm trying to decide what not to say, perhaps in order to say the essentials, so that you may understand that this was not normal warfare, normal combat. Well, how can I explain this? Perhaps well, here in this courtroom, there sits a woman who was She was equipped with forged Aryan papers at that time. She lived for some time outside the ghetto. She was employed as a teacher for Catholic children, she was safe then,
ושכמותה
and she and many others like
נשאלו
her
אם הם מוכנים
were asked
לחזור
whether they were prepared to come back into the ghetto.
לחייהם של המחתרת.
Their friends from the underground asked them to leave this shelter
לשתף,
in order to
להיות שותפים
be
לגורלנו
partners to our fate, share our fate
באובדן. והיא חזרה.
in the fighting,
ובשער הזה
and she returned.
לפי תעודה זו, מי
And through
שעבר
that gate, which it said in this announcement that whoever passes it goes out to buy some potatoes or bread, she herself, coming from the other direction, carried dynamite on her body, and she went through the gate once and twice and walked 30 kilometers in order to blow up a German military train, and she did blow it up. The first German military train which was blown up all over Lithuania. Lithuanians did not do it, nor Poles, nor Russians. A Jewish woman who, after she did this, had no base to return to. She had to walk 3 days and nights with wounded legs and feet. She had to go back to the ghetto. Imagine how we felt, we who sent her, what we experienced in that night, our worry lest she be captured, what would happen to her. Not only she and her friends, but perhaps the entire ghetto would be taken to task and be made responsible. What it means that not a single, I don't think a single fighting man had such heavy collective responsibility in all our modern era. Because whatever I do, the responsibility will be placed on my mother, on old people and children. We still did it despite everything. This woman is my wife, sir. We did this. We set fire to munition trains. We plundered arms out of the warehouses, and not one among our friends, quite a few of our friends paid with their lives, but they did not betray our secret. And I have here our battle orders. You will find something strange, perhaps. Our password for mobilization when the exterminations began was something strange. Lisa is calling was our password. Lisa is calling. That was the slogan, the password. Whenever our fighters heard that word, they were ordered to remain where they were, to hide, because people were ordered then to go to a predetermined place to obtain arms, firearms or other arms.
Does this name mean anything in particular?
Well, the meaning is, it's a very bloody meaning. In one of our campaigns, one of our friends, Liza Marum, was sent from the Vilna ghetto when we had learned that there was to be an action, extermination action in the Oshmiana ghetto, another ghetto. We sent her to go and warn the Jews, and she risked her life and managed to warn the people, but not everybody believed her, and they would not draw the conclusions and take action, but there were many people who did manage to escape into the woods. And then she went onwards and she brought our leaflets to other places. She was captured, she was tortured horribly unto death, but she did not betray us, she did not give out the secret. And that password was named after her. And there were others, many others. But to demonstrate the tragedy of this fight for human honor. Well, you asked me about Wittenberg's death. Perhaps, well, I shall not refrain from it. Yes, I shall describe.
Mr. Kovner, try and understand the difficulty here. If you say I'm not going to describe, so please don't.
Believe me, Your Honor, the greatest difficulty is for me to describe it, and not for others to listen to this story.
I don't have to tell you that we sympathize. There is another question I'm sure you'll understand.
That is true. I understand that, Your Honor. Well,
If it is difficult for you, then we might pass over to another question.
no, sir, I shall proceed. The first commander of the fighting resistance organization was a man, a wonderful man, named Yitzchako, we called him Itzik Wittenberg. Headquarters consisted of Itzik Wittenberg, Yosef Blazman, Andrasha Chvolnik, Nissan Reznik, and myself. Yitzchak Wittenberg, he was called Lon in the underground. Yosef Glazman, he was called Avraham. Abrasha Chvolnik, Nissan Reznik, and myself. We divided our duties among ourselves. He was chosen to be the commander. And we had other duties in headquarters. We asked what every underground seeks, help. We hardly obtained any help. We, through our contacts, we helped the non-Jewish underground be set up, and there was a man named Vitas heading that underground, a man active in the pre-war Communist Party. On the 8th of July, 1943, he was caught by the Gestapo. He committed suicide in the torture chamber. On the 15th of July, we heard a rumor, unverified rumor, that the man who was the liaison between him and the rebels in the ghetto, they knew only Wittenberg. He was known personally. Kozlovsky was the man, that he also had been captured. On the night of the 15th of July, Gens, the commander of the municipal police, sent his representative and wanted us to come urgently for consultation. He called Itzik Wittenberg to come there urgently. He called Abrasha Chvolnik, a woman named Chwaina Borowska, and myself. We were summoned. We were told that the meeting must be at a certain hour, but then it was postponed until 10 o'clock that night. We got to the office of the police commander. First he spoke about transfers, but we felt something in the air. And out of this feeling, an internal feeling which we had posted guards near all main buildings earlier. And now, after a few minutes of conversation, which was rather meaningless, a side door opened in that office, of Gens's office, and there appeared SS men with loaded submachine guns.
Now,
we were ordered to get up, and they asked, "Who is Wittenberg?" No one answered. So Gens pointed to Wittenberg and said, "This is Wittenberg." He was bound and was taken out. We were dazed. We told Gens, "You are a base traitor. We shall see you." And he said, "I am not to blame. One of your men was captured by the Gestapo. He gave Wittenberg's name, and I must turn him over. Otherwise, others would pay with their lives." This is what he said. We left the office, and he was led away by the Gestapo to the gate of the ghetto. It was not very far. The distance was a few hundred meters or less. Our sentries, our scouts saw what had happened. They immediately alerted other fighters. They stormed and charged the Gestapo men. There was an exchange of fire, and they escaped. We had Wittenberg with us.
קשה היה לשחרר אותו מהזיקה.
It was difficult to release him from the fetters, but
איש לא יכול היה לשער.
something happened which no one could have imagined. The Germans did not enter the ghetto,
לגנס.
but they told Gens that unless
עד 3 לפנות בוקר.
by 3 o'clock that night, Wittenberg is not brought and turned over to them,
משמידים את הגטו.
they are going to raise the ghetto.
מיד
Gens immediately
הגטו.
called all the ghetto together.
בריגדירים את המשטרה.
He alerted the policemen, the brigadiers.
ערך אסיפה המונית.
He had this mass meeting out there. He explained to the Jews that because of this one man, Wittenberg,
עלול הגטו להישמר.
the entire ghetto may be destroyed and annihilated.
הגטו נסער. תחילה לא האמין.
There was excitement. At first people wouldn't believe it. The hour of 3 o'clock passed. It was extended. The deadline was extended to 6 o'clock.
בגטו.
What happened in the ghetto,
כל תיאור לא יימצא אותו.
it cannot be described. No description will exhaust that.
או יותר נכון, גם ספרים ממש, וגם...
Books have been written about it, and passages in many books.
שיכול על זה להגיד משהו...
One of the few people who can speak about it,
ביותר, הוא לא כתב את
something
זה.
really authentic, he never wrote it down.
ויטנברג היה בידינו.
We had Wittenberg with us. We released him.
כשראינו מה מתחולל,
When we saw what was happening,
קרוז אל היהודים.
we printed a leaflet, a proclamation to all the Jews. I myself composed it, and I know it was not the truth which I said then.
ידעתי,
I
לא
knew
היה לנו שום סימן שצריכה להיות אקציה בגטו.
we had no indication that there was an action about to take place. It was a static situation. I wrote that there was a decision to exterminate the ghetto and that this was merely a pretext. We shall fight, we shall protect, defend ourselves, I said. And I took that leaflet to Wittenberg.
ציווה לגייס
He ordered
את
us
הארגון.
to mobilize the organization. We did so.
ואז
And then
יצאו לרחוב היהודים.
the Jews went out into the streets.
לא היה בגטו גרמנים.
There were no Germans in the ghetto. Gens mobilized all, everyone he could, intelligentsia, plain people, policemen at the head who obtained arms against us. Delegations, deputations came to us. They pleaded for mercy. They said, you cannot endanger the entire ghetto for one man. And negotiations began. First of all, we postponed this. We rejected it. And then there was this furious attack by people. They attacked us, those people who were about to be the victims. They charged us, the defenders, with axes, stones, sticks, even with arms. Arms which they obtained from the Germans. We faced our own brethren. We explained it to them. We gave orders to our fighters not to use arms, not even knives. Our people tore out their own hair. They were bleeding in the streets when they tried to tear apart this illusion that it was not because of one man. It became clear later that Kozlovsky indeed had informed and had betrayed the name. But this did not matter to us then. We could not give up our commander and turn him over, and then the negotiations began. Well, we hid Wittenberg. We said he was no longer in the ghetto. He had escaped. And there's another young woman who is in the courtroom now. She took him dressed in the guise of a woman. He was dressed as a woman from street to street. We ourselves, his friends in the headquarters, did not wish to know where he was in order to not to be placed in temptation. But then we were faced with a choice to open fire for the first time against the future victims, our brethren, all that we had built up for years is about to collapse. Because this happened, because we could be reduced to such terrible insanity, the victims could be reduced to that insanity because of begging for 1 hour of life. One perhaps cannot understand this. Now, towards morning, we reached Wittenberg's hideout, we, the members of the headquarters, his colleagues. We were dumb. We were dumbfounded. We were confused. Another attempt was made a moment before that by someone someone told Gens that another person will turn himself over. There was a volunteer for that, to take Wittenberg's place. He rejected that. He said there will be a confrontation with Kozlovsky, with the informer, but he promised that he will try to release the man from the Gestapo if he is turned over. And when they besieged us, the entire ghetto besieged us around our headquarters, and it was all we could do to get to Wittenberg, to this attic where he was. The revolver was there on the table. He wanted to commit suicide. No, he did not do that. And then he asked us, "Do you wish me to turn myself over?" We did not reply. And I told him, "Look, there are Jews in the streets. We shall have to fight them in order to get at the enemy. Perhaps the others will stand there and laugh derisively. That is the situation. Give an order and we shall fight. Are you prepared to give that order?" No, he was not prepared to give that order. He was a great man. He gave me the revolver. He appointed me as commander. He went out into the street. We all stood there. We had revolvers in our holsters. The fighters were on one side, the masses surrounding us, and they told us in the street, here he went to the ghetto gate to turn himself over to the Gestapo.
When did you see him then?
Yes, we tried to smuggle in poison, cyanamide. We did not manage. Something weird happened. Yes, he was tortured and he died. Historians will judge us to favor or disfavor. If I may be permitted to express my own opinion, today, even more than then, I believe that Wittenberg's death, that on behalf of the headquarters, with full awareness and consciousness, we turned him over to the Gestapo. That was one of the climaxes of the revolt, one of the greatest acts of heroism of a Jewish fighting underground in the ghetto, because no combat is worthy if between us and the enemy there was another separating wall.
Yes. Now, the last question, Mr. Kovner, is, until you set up the Fighting Jewish organization, how many Jews were sent, of Vilna were sent to Kona to be exterminated?
About 40,000. It was very intensive. It took place within a few months.
Are there any questions to be put by Dr. Servatius to the witness? I have no questions as the answer.
Your Honor, may I be permitted to say one thing more about the oath which I gave here? Well, my solemn affirmation. I wish to say this, that I said I would speak the truth, only the truth, and nothing but the truth. I'm sure that I spoke truth, nothing but the truth, but the whole truth.
Of course, this gives me an opportunity to tell you, and also to the Attorney General, the whole truth means the whole truth with regard to the questions you've been asked. It is quite clear that this is not the whole truth. We know it full well. There is no question whatsoever about the fact that the whole truth has not been said, but in the words expressed by you, you have said the whole truth. This is what we meant. It is quite clear that this was what was actually meant, to tell the whole truth within the framework of the testimony. There was a misunderstanding here.
Judge Rave, merely one question. You spoke at the beginning about these 3 walls. You remember that? It's a brief question, and you may reply in brief. The first wall were the collaborators. Who were those?
The first wall of those who participated. These were the organizations, semi-military organizations, which were mobilized from among the inhabitants of the place, Estonians, Belarusians, Ukrainians, who didn't go to the front.
You said the second wall were the incited masses. Who were those?
I meant the local population, which were anti-Semites, and the third wall.
Who were the planners, the third wall? Whom did you mean by that? Yes. Judge Halevi, you said at the end that between us and the enemy something was separating us, if I understood you correctly. What did you mean by that?
The illusion that this is not one fate, that up to the very last moment, even if they knew what was attended upon them, because they always gave us some sort of spark of hope that you perhaps will be outside the line waiting for death. This illusion had given various results, because there were many people who tried to save themselves on the account of the others, and they did their utmost to save themselves. Only the minority, which felt itself less illusioned, who felt what the situation was, they understood perhaps better their allegiance to various organizations. Those people realized that they had to give personal example. There were those who shouldered the responsibility of the rebellion, and one can always ask, who were those who were ready to fight? And those who were ready to fight were those who were less humiliated and who knew how to be within the ghetto and how to be responsible for what was going on in the ghetto.
This illusion was deliberately planted by the Nazis, isn't that so?
Of course, the Germans systematically